were excited to be visiting fascinating Sabah again, one of 2 states which comprise the Malaysian section of Borneo, the world's 3rd largest island. A night in the main city of Kota Kinabalu, then off early to the surrounding hills with 2 expert local birders. Perched up high was one of the smallest of the spectacular Broadbill family, well named when you see that eye-catching turquoise bill. Gleaning insects from the bark was the speedy, agile, velvet-fronted nuthatch. This agamid flying lizard whizzed in over our heads and perched, flapping its gular membrane wings, a contributor to the constant rainforest noise. Great! Our first Trogon of the trip. Last year, on these same slopes, we saw the similarly spectacular scarlet rump Trogon. Red-billed malcoa, hopping and flying, but always in cover. The tiny, scintillating rufous-backed kingfisher, the difficult-to-spot crested jay shrike, and a tiny raptor, white-fronted Acker Bornean falconet. This year, we added the largest bee-eater, the monotypic red-bearded bee-eater. Thankfully, it's also the noisiest, announcing its presence since it stays at such high elevations which makes spotting difficult. A banded kingfisher. This is the male with a rufous breast. The female has a white breast. Yes, a great sighting.
What a bird.
We drove back towards KK, stopping at Lycus wetlands on the outskirts of the city adjacent to the imposing floating mosque. The heat haze and distance made viewing a little difficult, but there were plenty of water birds. Back to our hotel, overlooking the bustling KK waterfront on the South China Sea. Thanks to it being Ramadan, we were able to experience a 3 a.m. breakfast before we headed off into the Crocker Range, with Mount Kinabalu in the distance. We stopped at Trus Madi Birding Station to try for some target species. While it was initially quite dark in the rainforest understory, it was a lively, entertaining spot. Crested partridge like to travel in small parties, this time accompanied by a couple of red-breasted partridge. Babblers are a huge Asian family. Grey-hooded babbler was previously known as chestnut-winged babbler, from which it's been split. Members of another extensive bird family, yellow-bellied bulbuls. There was a constant stream of birds and mammals to observe. On the dark floor of the rainforest ground, birds like this rare thrush are very difficult to spot, so this was a real treat. Then the star of the show strolled in, the spectacular Bulwer's pheasant, a Bornean endemic, which has become rare due to loss of habitat and hunting. When the male is displaying, the blue wattles distend hugely, both up and down, and the magnificent tail is completely fanned out. Here he is, eclipsing the more sombre female. And he was off with a flurry. But the activity continued. A resident flycatcher. Mugimaki flycatcher looks similar to rufous-breasted flycatcher, but is an uncommon migrant whose Japanese name means wheat sower because it appears in Japan at planting time. Siberian blue robin is a migrant from the Palearctic, wintering in Southeast Asia. Why blue? The genders are distinctly dimorphic. We were lucky enough to see the male previously in Peninsular Malaysia. In an adjacent hide last year, we also saw the dazzling Bornean banded Pitta. We crossed the road to the second hide where Alex could hear a Trogon, and sitting up very high was a male orange-breasted Trogon. We had seen the female on the peninsula. It's difficult to pull yourself away from this very rewarding spectacle, but we had to leave for Mount Kinabalu. We stopped on the way to buy fruit at the extensive markets in Kundasang at the foot of the mountain, before driving up into Kinabalu Park and our charming accommodation. Next morning we were up very early, waiting for transport to take us as far as you can drive up the mountain, trying to ID birds in the darkness and mist. We were lucky enough to spot the rare endemic Everett's thrush. The mist was beginning to clear, and the birds were easier to see when we reached the Timpohan Gate. The Bornean tree pie is a vocal and conspicuous Bornean endemic, as is the confiding, tail-fanning Bornean whistling thrush. Grey-chinned minaret is distinctly sexually dimorphic. Walking slowly down, scanning for birds, was a great way to spot other wildlife, including another Bornean endemic, the smallest squirrel in the world, the very cute tufted pygmy squirrel, which runs up and down trees, feeding on the lichens. The clouds were almost gone so that we could see the distant, bare, craggy top of the mountain. And yes, a bird we especially wanted to see, Bornean green magpie. Despite its amazing bright cartoonish colouring and loud calls, it had proved shy and difficult to spot as it clambered among leaves the exact same shade as its plumage, keeping under cover and rarely fully emerging. Fantastic. Grey-throated babblers like to forage on verges in busy groups, trilling continuously to keep contact. Alex had seen something. We had to look very carefully, but it proved to be the sought-after endemic trogon of the mountains, Whitehead's trogon, a truly stunning bird which habitually sits quietly, making it difficult to spot despite its dazzling plumage. Almost back down, and good views from smaller montane birds as we made our delayed way to a very late breakfast. So late, in fact, that we were the only ones there. The rain started, and it was still drizzling next morning when we started up the mountain again, this time on foot. Farther up, we spotted the large, luminous green Whitehead's Broadbill, the second of the sought-after Whitehead's trio of montane birds. Last year in August, we were very fortunate to watch one at its nest. Then it became a trogon kind of day. Trogons must surely be one of the most irresistibly beautiful of bird families. Later that day, we left the mountain and headed southeast to Telupid with one special bird in mind. We stopped on the way for lunch at the lovely Sabah Tea Gardens. Next day we were up early to drive to a village where we could climb up to a hide. First, a ride in the back of an ancient flatbed truck through a swollen little river, and then up the mountain. The incessant drizzle made it an interesting journey. But this was a hide for the spectacular, very rare, endangered Bornean Peacock Pheasant, so we were prepared to wait, hoping the rain would eventually stop and encourage the bird to appear. At last, the female came in, leading the way. And when her partner hesitantly made his appearance, we were overawed by one of the most dazzling birds we've ever seen. Considering how shy and elusive this bird is, plus its rarity, we relished every moment of appreciating it as it strutted around, occasionally flapping up one side of its tail and a wing for the benefit of the female. Yes, we enjoyed that. Previously, on the peninsula, we had seen another pheasant, the mountain peacock pheasant. Down from the mountain to drive to La Datu. The rain became heavier and there was flooding everywhere. We spent the night in a hotel overlooking a busy road, but happily also overlooking a roost and nesting spot for water birds. From La Datu we drove to Tabin Wildlife Reserve, 9,000 hectares of pristine rainforest surrounded by secondary forest, which in turn is virtually surrounded with palm oil plantations. The road to the lodge runs between the forest and the plantations, with numerous wildlife interactions between these two habitats. Our cabin was beside the river, which was swollen and fast flowing because of all the rain. A boardwalk led to the main building and dining room. We met our local guide, Raphael. Then, back at the cabin, impervious to the rain, our imperturbable second-story neighbour, who spat out stones thumped on our roof. Another neighbour was the lovely arboreal endemic Previs squirrel, which ran up and down the trees beside the river. Plenty of birds around too. The sodden tracks made for a rocky ride as pigtailed macaques scattered. Black and red broadbills make their nests over water, and there certainly was plenty of that. That night we went for our first night safari, a thrilling, jolting ride. Despite its name, the diminutive mouse deer is not closely related to a true deer. Sunda palm civet is commonly seen along the boundary road where it can cross to forage in the palm oil plantation. Civets rarely call, but rely on their scent glands to dispel oil and mark their presence. We were lucky with even this partial view of the uncommon Blythe's frogmouth, thanks to Raphael's spotting skills. Another uncommon nocturnal bird, but a much better view of this rather stern-looking barred eagle owl. Then the highlight of the night for me, Sunda leopard cat. No larger than a domestic cat, this beautiful, dainty little night hunter is the best adapted of the wildcats to disturbed areas, so it's often seen along this boundary road on the edge of the palm oil plantations. Early next morning, we drove to the edge of a track where we could walk into dense rainforest, with our main target being blue-banded pitta. A scarce, difficult-to-find ground-skulking bird, black-throated wren babbler.
It's open this side, bro, if you wanna.
Then, an unexpected sighting. Up in the highest canopy which it favours, the highly nomadic, endemic Bornean Bristlehead, a very unusual bird, monotypic in genus and family. A neck-crunching view, very difficult to see from ground level. Congratulations all round. It took a bit of tracking down, but a good view of our beautiful target bird, male blue-headed pitta. Last year, we had seen the very differently plumaged female. We cleaned the tars on the way back to the lodge. Unmistakable with its large size and red casque, rhinoceros hornbill. At night, the frogs came out, and then we were on the truck for another safari. A sleepy little prinia. Then another view of Sunda leopard cat. This time we could observe the white markings on the back of its ears, which look like eyes, and may discourage predators from stealing its prey. They may also act as visual signals at night, keeping a mother and kittens together. Giant red flying squirrel spends its whole life in the canopy and can glide between trees for up to 150 metres. Malay civet spends most of its time on the ground, unlike the smaller palm civet. A porcupine scuttled back to the rainforest from foraging in the palm oil plantations for fruit and seeds. And another. Otter Civet, fully nocturnal, arboreal and semi-aquatic, so rare and elusive that in over 20 years of guiding, Raphael had seen it only 3 times. Wow. Next morning we were plodding the muddy tracks again in search of the very difficult giant pitta. First came an unusual daytime sighting of a mouse deer feeding unconcernedly right in front of us. Another delightful broadbill, those colours like something out of Disney. Raphael led us into the forest where his amazing skills managed to locate our target, giant pitta, the largest, shyest and most elusive of a shy and elusive family. Back to the lodge for lunch and a quick walk for nearby birds before the rain came again. When it cleared, we went out on the safari truck. Back at the lodge, the sun had come out at last and brought out the butterflies. The gibbons in the trees above our cabin were having a great time, and so were we. They can swing through the trees at up to 56 kilometres an hour, jumping gaps of 15 metres. Amazing to watch. It looks so effortless. Next morning, although we would have been happy to stay much longer at this amazing reserve, we had to leave for La Datu and on to Borneo Rainforest Lodge in the Danum Valley. This was an impressively luxurious lodge. The view from our cabin across to the river was superb. There was a herd of Sambar Deer, the largest deer in Borneo, which grazed here every day. Looking down over the balcony was an easy way to view feeding birds. Spider hunters don't just eat insects, but also pierce the base of flowers to extract nectar, as this one did with the ginger plant. We met up with our local guide, Nevin. Birding here is done mainly by walking up and down the main track, with smaller tracks leading off into the rainforest. There's also a canopy walkway to get you right up with the birds. We were hoping for a fruiting tree nearby to attract feeding birds, but we were at the wrong time of the year for that, so had to be content with distant views. At night, we went out in an electric vehicle so as not to disturb the wildlife. The birds, like this snugly curled up pitta, can keep sleeping. It rained again, and the frogs loved it. Later, on a night walk, we saw 2 owls. We breakfasted, and so did the maroon langurs, aka red leaf monkeys, which are largely arboreal and hang out in the trees around the raised dining area, providing plenty of eye-level amusement for diners. Then it was off down the hilly track again for our target bird, great Argus. Another endemic, Bornean forktail, which favours rocky streams. We peeled off into the rainforest as the rain began, heading for the great Argus hide. Frustratingly, the bird was calling very near the hide while we waited for a couple of hours. Then, just as we were packing up, the female came in. We were happy with that, if not with the leeches. The bushes around the lodge were excellent for small passerines. Flower peckers are a large and attractive family of tiny birds. Their name says it all. Then out came the sun and the butterflies, some taking the chance to sip up the nutrients from the puddles, some just basking. An unusual escape mechanism. In the afternoon, another hill to climb and more birds to see. Another wren babbler. Obligingly, this one hopped up off the ground, which made for good views. A spider hunter. Its yellow breast and thin bill indicated little spider hunter. The river was surging. Another of the extensive babbler family. Alex heard something. A rufous-winged philantoma, very like a large flycatcher. One of my favourite birds, Asian fairy bluebird, a beautiful bird with a beautiful name. The rufous-tailed shama is uncommon and much more difficult to spot. There were unusually good views of Rufous picolet, a charming tiny woodpecker which forages low and mostly inconspicuously. From low and tiny to high and large, a back view of the critically endangered helmeted hornbill with its elongated long central tail feathers. Whiskered tree swift, an exquisite little bird and fun to admire as it sailed from its perch and back in one graceful arc, catching insects on the way. We couldn't leave without Trogon whisperer Alex producing yet another beauty for us. Dyard's Trogon, male and female. Then it was back again, inevitably to Lard Datu, to meet our local guide Sylvester and transfer to Utan Rainforest Lodge for another very special target, Bornean Ground Cuckoo. The clouds were ominous and more rain lashed down. Once we were off the road and onto potholed palm oil plantation tracks, it became a jolting journey through floodwaters. We were very glad to arrive. But no time to unpack. Out on night safari again with our guide. A different nocturnal bird, large-tailed nightjar. Another sighting of Malay civet, stockier than most other civets. Next morning we set off very early before breakfast, eager to get to the Bornean Ground Cuckoo hide. Yellow rubber boots were the fashionable choice in that flooded habitat. The hide was comfortable and dry, but the display area looked more suited to water birds. Undeterred, the spectacular Bornean crested Fireback passed through, with female in tow, looking for food. There was none, so after a desultory glance at the ground, and many admiring glances from us, the pair passed on. Three hours later, and time for a stretch. The single Sharma stayed high and dry, singing cheerfully as ever. But after another 2 hours we were packing up when the cuckoos suddenly ran in. And oh, it was worth the wait. What magnificent birds, terrestrial, secretive, extremely wary, endangered by habitat loss, and usually inconspicuous in dark rainforest understory. Observing them like this was an experience not to be missed. Their shimmering blues, violets, pinks and greens kept changing with the light. It was a stunning display. And yes, we were very, very happy.
Great. Really great.
Fantastic.
Fantastic.
But the day didn't end there. Just off the main track was a spot for black-crowned pitta, where we had perfect sunlit views of a brilliantly coloured male. Then it was on to another nearby hide, where this time we enjoyed a more leisurely observation of the equally stunning Bornean crested fireback, another ground bird where the male sports an impressive electric blue face mask. This time the single male was surrounded by quite a harem of females. We had seen the Malay crested fireback in peninsular Malaysia, where the male's tail is white and the underbelly dark with white streaking. In the distance from this hide, we were able to watch a pair of black and red broadbills busy building their hanging nest over the water. There was also a Sabah partridge calling incessantly. Sadly, it didn't show, but that persistent call was certainly familiar from our sighting on last year's visit. In the late afternoon, we went up the Sungai Kapur river mouth towards the sea and passed a family of proboscis monkeys, the snub-nosed female and baby, and the large-bellied male with his very prominent drooping nose. We floated under a colony of giant bats, just as they were ready for their evening flight. The clouds were coming in again, heavy with rain, as we headed back with just enough time for a spotlighting walk and a good view of Sunda Scops Owl. We were off early the next day for the long drive back to Kota Kinabalu and our waterfront hotel. The last day of our trip was spent mainly in the spacious open habitat of the rice paddies, with water birds predominating. There were some we knew from home, and others from familiar families, like the striated grass bird. Javan or Chinese pond heron, so similar in non-breeding. This bird certainly behaved like our Australian pipit, an attractive, uncommon, long-tailed shrike. Ornate sunbird is very similar to the Australian olive-backed sunbird, while white-breasted wood swallow occurs in northern Australia. And the common moorhen is very like our dusky moorhen. Western osprey looks identical to eastern osprey from this position. Always good to see a yellow wagtail, a rare vagrant to Australia. Later, we visited a beach where we had close views of cattle and closer views of some birds we had previously seen on the first day of the trip at the lagoon. Great view of Tibetan sandplover. Siberian sandplover occurs in Australia, and both were once lumped as lesser sandplover. A closer view too of Kentish plover. Back to KK for the last time, and from our window we spotted a house crow, one of the only small colony established in Sabah. And circling overhead, white-bellied sea eagle, the white marks on its underwings indicating a young bird. What a magnificent last bird to end a wonderful, unforgettable trip.